Hello! Today I want to show you how to build a gate just like this one. You know, there are lots of YouTube videos out there that'll show you how to build the simplest of gates. But for just a little bit more work, you can have something to really be proud of, as well as improve the curb appeal of your home. It's really not that difficult, and it's a big step up from a common quick and dirty gate. So let's go back in the shop and I'll show you how it's done. The key to making the construction of this gate absolutely simple is the Fez Tool Domino. If you haven't used this tool before, it allows you to use loose tenons, or what's called dominoes, for the joinery. Now there are lots of alternatives to using the domino machine, like dowels, or even just using your router. But if you watch, you'll see how easy this tool makes the joinery absolutely no-brainer. Not only is it fast and easy, but the results are a very strong joint. And for a gate, that's a real step up from one that's made with just butt joints and nails. I built this entire frame of this gate using pressure-treated lumber. In my area, any outdoor wood project is going to be the target of termites. As you can see here, termites absolutely devoured this old gate that was constructed out of cedar. Pressure-treated lumber is created by putting standard construction-grade lumber into a high-pressure vat and pushing antifungal preservative solution into the lumber, usually some form of copper solution like copper azole or copper borate. Treated lumber got a bad name for itself a few decades ago because of the very toxic chemicals they used. Today, copper-based chemicals are much safer, and today's formulations are very effective against decay and insects. There are typically a few challenges when using pressure-treated lumber. Specifically, it's wet and ugly after treatment, especially pressure-treated Doug fir, which is available in my area. The process uses mechanical incisors to ensure chemical penetration. The result is lots of indentation marks on the surface of the wood. Very ugly. The other side effect of pushing in those chemicals into the wood is it leaves it extremely wet when it leaves the processing mill. And wet wood is likely to twist and warp as it dries out. Not exactly what you want for a gate. The best way I've found to dry pressure-treated lumber is to stack it with space in between each piece so air can circulate around it. Place the stack in a shaded area like the north side of a building. You want it to dry slowly and evenly. I then place weight on the stack to encourage it to dry flat and straight. I usually use several hundred pounds of cement block to do so. Patience is the next step. The lumber I used for this gate took 4 months to dry out. It's not uncommon to have a piece of pressure-treated lumber from the lumber yard to be around 45% moisture content. At something around 15% is where lumber will stay straight and is much easier to cut and work with. The design of this gate is actually fairly simple. I begin by dimensioning the pieces I need at the miter saw. I'm making my gate 39 inches wide by 72 inches tall, which will fit nicely between the two existing posts. I cut the two stiles 72 inches long and then cut two 2x6 pieces 32 inches long for the top and bottom rails of the gate. Then another 32-inch 2x4 for the middle rail, which will create the transom window for the pickets. After the pieces are cut to length, I like to run it through the drum sander to clean off all the grit, grime, and that accumulates while it's been sitting outside for months. It also takes off that awful brown stain that the lumber mill puts on it. I set my drum sander to just kiss the surface. We're not wanting to change the dimensions of the material, just clean it up a bit. If you don't have access to the drum sander, you can accomplish exactly the same thing with an orbital sander. It just takes a bit longer. I lay them out on my bench and check to see how square it is. It's already starting to look like a gate. Before we go any further with the construction, it's time to deal with the ugliness of this pressure-treated wood. We want to fill all those ugly incision marks and other defects with wood filler and end up with a smooth, paintable surface. I use an inexpensive wood filler from DAP that is exterior rated. This stuff is water-based, so you can add a couple drops of water to get the consistency you need. I shoot for something that looks like drywall mud. Then I use a wide putty knife to apply it to the surface. I found that if you wet the surface of the wood with a sponge first, it helps the filler stick and it's easier to smooth out. The next day, I hit it with a random orbit sander with 120 grit paper and knock off the sharp edges and the high spots. Once painted, no one will know how it started out. To get started with the joinery, I mock up the pieces on my bench and mark the face with a pencil mark where I want each of the loose tenon dominoes. Using the Fez Tool Domino for this type of application makes the job super easy. I'm using 3 dominoes at the top and bottom rail joints and 2 dominoes for the center mullion and the 2x4 rail. I'll be using 100mm long by 12mm thick dominoes, meaning my mortise will be 2 inches deep for each side of the joint. To create these large deep mortises, I'll be using the DF700, which is the Big Brother domino machine. The extra large dominoes will add a lot of strength to the frame. With the basic frame of the gate built, I want to work on the transom window pickets. After goofing around with some scrap, I've decided on 5 evenly spaced pickets that are 1 inch by 1 inch in size to give me the look I want. This time I used the smaller DF500 machine to put in smaller 5 by 30mm dominoes in the center of each of the pickets. Fez Tool includes this trim stop accessory that makes the centering of each mortise a breeze. I do another dry fit of the whole frame assembly. Even without glue, once the dominoes are fully seated, the gate is amazingly rigid. The next step is to create some grooves for the plywood panels to fit into. There are lots of different ways to cut grooves like this, and I've decided to use the router table. I drop each piece onto a 3/8" router bit and push it through, then flip the piece and make another pass to assure the groove is centered. Got this all dry fitted, and I think I'm going to take a minute just to round over these edges, these sharp edges, and they'll hold paint a little bit better. It's kind of dusty, so I'm going to go ahead and put a dust mask on. To add a bit of interest, I'm going to make this decorative cut on the top rail of the gate. I start at the table saw with my blade tipped at 45 degrees, and I make 2 end cuts. Then I move over to the bandsaw and connect the 2 cuts together. Using the spindle sander, I clean up the saw blade marks afterwards. It's time to turn our attention to creating the panels that'll fit into the grooves we just cut. Using my track saw, I cut a piece of 1/2 inch MDO plywood. MDO, or medium density overlay plywood, is a good choice for exterior applications like this. It's a material that's often used for road signs. It's very stable and has a paper face on the outside that takes paint well and stands up to the weather. After the panels are cut, I go back and paint on some wood preservative into the cut areas of the pressure-treated frame and panel edges. This is sort of a belt and suspenders approach. This copper solution will soak into the wood, so no untreated surfaces are accessible to insects. I do my final dry fit and glue up rehearsal. This is going to be a complicated glue up, and rehearsing it helps eliminate mistakes. For this assembly, I've decided to use epoxy. Epoxy gives more than an hour of working time, and it's a great choice for exterior projects. After using a scale to mix the ratios consistently, I begin the glue up. One nice thing about using epoxy is that it lubricates the joinery, so it goes together much easier than traditional wood glue. I'll use lots of clamps to pull it together and clamp it to the table to keep it flat. Then let it dry for at least 24 hours. Before we can move on to finishing, I'm going to take out another insurance policy. Most likely unnecessary, but it can't hurt. I'm drilling a hole for a 3/8" dowel through one of the tenons at each of the frame joint. Then drive a glued dowel into the hole. Once the glue is dried, I spend a few minutes flushing the dowel. Now it's as easy as brushing and rolling on some paint. I prime the whole gate and then add 2 top coats of exterior rated paint with light sanding in between coats. All that filling and prep work is now paying off. The gate is looking really sharp. It's time to start thinking about hardware and mounting the gate. You could use some surface-mounted gate hinges, which would give you a very traditional look. But I've decided to hang it like a door using stainless steel hinges mortised into the gate and a jamb frame. I got this hinge jig on the clearance table at the home center, and I thought I'd give it a try on this project. Once the hinge mortises are cut, I use a self-centering bit to pre-drill for the screws. Installation is now a breeze. I just plumb the jamb and attach it with some screws. For the finishing touches, I found this lever latch on Amazon for a good price. It installs easily and it works much better than a regular gate latch. It operates more like a door, which is intuitive. Lastly, I mounted this gate closer. This thing works amazing. It keeps the gate from slamming, and I can always make sure the gate fully closes regardless of the wind, so the dog can't escape. Well, that wraps up this build. I should mention that I do have a measured drawing and a materials list for this project, if you're interested in creating one for your own property. Just drop me an email and I'll give you the details on how to get yours. You know, this gate is a big step up from a typical DIY gate. It's strong, and it's not going to sag over time. And the material choices we've made means that the gate is going to last a long time. Before you go, I would really appreciate if you could hit that thumbs up button for this video. And if you enjoy this type of project, consider hitting the subscribe button as well. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you'll join me next time